Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yes, greetings, and welcome to another episode of African News Review. I am your host, as usual, Adesoji Iginla, and with me, two of what I consider the most brilliant minds when it comes to African affairs. I will begin with the gentleman. He is Comrade Milton Allimadi, host of Black Star News on WBAI 99.5 FM New York, author of Manufacturing Hate. And what else can I say about him? Welcome.
Thank you.
A living legend.
I listened to her. How are you, comrade?
Doing wonderful, sir.
And yes, to the lady in the middle, ever smiling, as they will say, slouching now, right? She's the author of Self-Love Revolution, host of Rethinking Freedom, and co-host of Women and Resistance. And might I add, an author of a new book titled Kwanzaa, a celebration guide for home and community.
Oh, perfect timing.
Exactly, just before Kwanzaa. And just one of my best pages in the book is that this is the elders showing the young ones how to do it. And look at that.
The art is phenomenal.
Yes.
The artwork is beautiful.
So it's available on Amazon. And so don't just buy it. Also go there and do leave a review afterwards. And yes, welcome, sister.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing the book. It's the book I was looking for as I deepened my celebration of Kwanzaa with my family, because many of us, obviously, were not raised with it. It's a relatively recent holiday, just we're talking in the 60s. And so trying to find information that allowed me to not just be performative, but for it to really ground my family as we end the year and go into a new year. I was picking things from different places. And so I wrote a book that very simply brings it all together. A 3-year-old who can read it and understand it, and a 95-year-old can read it and engage with it as well. So thank you so much for sharing it.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you for adding to our collective knowledge. And without further ado, we begin. News from where you at. Let's begin with Sister Aya.
My goodness, there's so much news. The one that I would highlight today is we have a program here in the state of Texas, and many other states have it as well. It is a program to help with underutilized businesses. It's called Hub. And what the state of Texas has decided as of this past week is that businesses owned by quote unquote minorities and businesses owned by women will no longer be classified as underutilized businesses in the state of Texas. So ask me, who's left then?
Yeah.
I suppose veterans are left, and I guess white men. I mean, there are no statistics to back up this decision. We just unilaterally have decided that after centuries of closing out women and people of color, knowing that women in the United States could only get loans as recently as 1973 in their own names, nonetheless, in 2025, we are going to decide that these businesses owned by these entities are not underutilized. And we're going to go back to pre-Jim Crow, if you will, where white men keep everything, even though we all pay tax, we all pay our taxes. So just a little bit of news from the great state of Texas.
Great state of.
Okay, so, I want to echo that as well. And then I have another item I want to mention, but in terms of what you just said, and this is a scandal that I think only Black Star has written about consistently here in New York. the New York City spends about $20 billion every year with private vendors,
20
private
million.
businesses, Out of that, guess what percentage goes to Black owned and Latino owned businesses? Just a wild guess.
10%?
Okay, good try. Reasonable. Sister?
I'm gonna say under 10%. If it's looking like the state of Texas, we might be at 2%.
Yes, it's actually between 1% and 2%. It's at as of 2 years ago, it was less than 1%. Just think about that. It means, and you talk about, the taxpayers, they're subsidizing European-owned businesses all these decades. What needs to be done, obviously, is a retroactive reassessment. And that's why, with all its shortcomings, up to date, the late Marion Barry is still revered
Yes.
in many circles because of what he did in Washington, D.C. He said, you bring the contract to my desk, if 25% to 30% is not reserved for Black-owned businesses, I'm not going to sign the contract. Boom. And look how it transformed Washington, just literally snap like that. Even with the drug scandal he had, when Marion Barry joined the ancestors, even Obama sent a long note of condolences. Because at the end of the day, he delivered. Just think about it. New York, $20 billion, less than 1%. It's a crime. It's a scandal. Nobody writes about it. I hope this, in fact, Eric Adams, such a liar. He said when he is elected, he's going to change that. He's going to make sure that Black-owned businesses get their due share. He did zero. Instead, a stop and frisk went up under his administration. So I say this to say that will be the true test of the new mayor. If he is able to impact that, then he will truly pass the test. Actually, I think this is enough. I'll leave my other points for later on. I think this is a very important topic.
Okay.
And so what is clear is that elections have consequences. So people who are still sitting it out or being low informed, going by emotion versus facts, it hurts us all. Because think of if 10% of that 20 billion was coming back into Black-owned businesses or Hispanic-owned businesses. Just think of how that begins to transform.
The housing, the
Yes.
employment, the schools, the decrease in crime and all that. People talk about crime as if there's no correlation between crime and wealth and income and employment. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Yes. Over here, the talk was a local government in Ireland, Northern Ireland to be specific, who chose to fly the Palestinian flag over their building. And for some reason, I emphasize that word, two protesters decided they were going to climb the building and to pull down the flag. Guess what? They were arrested, but then, as it were, the right-wing press here took to doing what they normally would do to vilify the council for going against the wishes of two people within the constituency. That's the high point of our news here. So it just goes to show that even when the entire society agrees that an egregious crime has been committed, you will still find the odd, thick-headed individuals who will decide, no, what? They have an axe to grind, as it were. So that's it. Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight.
In your neck of the woods, the UK government just arrested a Palestinian-born but UK citizen who is a physician. They just arrested her because she had posted information in support of Palestine
Yeah,
and
that's the
in
doctor.
opposition to
Yeah,
Israel.
that's the
And
editor.
she has no medical complaints filed against her, nothing with no issues with her job, but they actually want to suspend her from being able to practice as a physician prior to any hearing, investigation, anything. And
Yeah.
and rightfully
Okay.
so, on video, she was asking, wait a second, you're the UK police. You're here to arrest me on behalf of Israel. Like, what is going on here?
Right. Right.
So
But
that
sister,
is
here's the thing. You remember how they used to ridicule and laugh at Stalinism under the Soviet Union? Well, that day has arrived in the West, right? And George Orwell was completely correct, 100%. Anybody who has not yet read George Orwell, this is the time.
1984.
Yeah, especially 1984, right? The hypocrisy is just amazing, you know?
Yes. Okay. And with that, we're talking about history. We go back to The Guardian for our first story today. And it reads, African leaders push for recognition of colonial crimes and reparation. Algeria's foreign minister says African countries and people continue to pay a heavy price for colonialism. And it reads, African leaders are pushing to have colonial-era crimes recognized, criminalized, and addressed through reparations. At a conference in the Algerian capital, Algiers, diplomats and leaders convened to advance an African Union resolution passed at a meeting earlier this year calling for justice and reparations for victims of colonialism. A legal framework, he added, would ensure restitution is seen as neither a gift nor favor. The quote is, Africa is entitled to demand the official and explicit recognition of the crimes committed against its people during the colonial period and an indispensable first step towards addressing the consequences of that era for which African countries and peoples continue to pay a heavy price in terms of exclusion, marginalization, and backwardness. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, sister.
again to just provide some context, because we always want to have information beyond what is just in these articles. I would definitely recommend a number of books. I think some we've mentioned on this channel before. Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth or Dying Colonialism will definitely be at the top of my list, those two. You can also look at Asia Jebar wrote a book titled Fantasia, an Algerian Cavalcade. It's actually written more as a novel, but it still gives you some information. And then just, again, this has to be, I think, number one in terms of books we've mentioned on this channel would be Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and understanding that concept, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Decolonizing the Mind, and of course, Kwame Nkrumah looking at neocolonialism. Okay, so having said that, because y'all are building libraries, right? But just not buying books, we're actually going to read the books so that these things make more sense to us. I think that it is absolutely right for African leaders to be pushing to have these colonial era crimes recognized, criminalized, and addressed through reparations. And of course, Mehdi Hassan is doing a great job of exposing some of the arguments for reparations in Africa and in the Caribbean as well. And we know that CARICOM has also come together to advocate. They're jointly advocating for reparations through the UN with support from actually the UN Secretary General Guterres. Of course, anytime that you have to go to these bodies to beg for recognition, kind of begs the issue, if you will. I think that what's important is that we recognize it for ourselves first and foremost, and that we start to operate in different ways that don't allow what happened in the past to happen again. That's what's so that multiple things need to happen all at the same time. One is a recognition of this for ourselves. We are not teaching this history in Africa. Most Africans living today do not have an understanding of the history or of what these colonizers actually did. We don't talk about it and we don't teach it. So I'm going to say first, we need to educate ourselves. Educating ourselves means then that we move differently. So some of the deals and articles we're going to talk about later show that we still haven't learned this lesson in the way that we keep throwing our arms wide open to the very people who have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that your lives don't matter, our lives don't matter. The other thing that I would say is, if we understand that they are criminals, if we're recognizing these as crimes, then you don't open yourself up to be a victim again, at least not in the same way, right? Having said that, should they continue to push at the level of the UN? Absolutely. I think we fight on all levels. And here's what I would definitely say. Reparations are absolutely due. Because just as, the one of the arguments is, I didn't own slaves, I wasn't born there, you weren't enslaved, this doesn't matter. But that is a very naive conversation to have, because you got to go back and trace who benefited from those crimes, where the resources went to, because those people and their descendants are still benefiting from it, including this concept of the West as first world and Africa and Caribbean nations as third world. So it's not like the benefit just dissipated. Someone is still benefiting from it today. And conversely, some groups of people are still being punished as a result of that. They're still bearing all of the scars of that. So I don't care if your grandparents or your great-great-grandparents stole what belonged to me and you are now benefiting from it. Yeah, time to turn it over. So I do believe that we should continue this fight for reparations, and good job, Algiers, in kind of setting themselves up to some degree as, hey, ground zero, because certainly we know of the genocide that took place in Algiers.
Yes.
To the tune of at least 1.5 million people. And so glad to see this, but African leaders, get educated, educate your populace, and fight harder.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. That's an excellent summation of the history and the resources that people should access. So I will just add a few points to that presentation. And number one, I like the fact that it's being presented as a unified African Union approach, which is very good. They should do more issues around that unified approach. Certainly, even if it does not get the results, it will get more coverage and have more impact. And then in terms of what the sister said, the counter argument that people say, I wasn't there and all that, you notice nobody says that about the reparations that Germany is paying to Israel up to date. They don't say, oh, I wasn't a part of Hitler regime, I wasn't there and all that nonsense. They don't. So that argument does not carry any water at all. And then the article says the estimates are in the trillions of dollars. Of course, it's correct. We know how much was taken without compensation from the continent in terms of the people killed as well and the free labor. So now you realize how Africans and African descendants have been subsidizing European opulence for centuries in Europe and here in the United States, the offspring of Europe as well. And of course, this marginalization and exploitation is not historical only, it's even contemporary. The current terms of trade, we sell our valuable resources for cheap, and we import manufacturers which are produced with our resources for exponentially higher cost or price. Maybe one other point I wanted to mention. Okay, so there's some things that we should start doing for ourselves. The article discussed the artifacts. Some are being returned, many not returned. I think we need to have a collective approach on that as well. I've always said that. There's no need really for artifacts to be returned to Nigeria, to Uganda, to Kenya, and all that. Because it costs, maintaining them also adds burden on cost. And all these countries are suffering from financial deficits. What we need to do is, so long as the headquarters of the African Union is still in Addis Ababa, let's build a state-of-the-art museum in Addis Ababa, the Museum of Africa. All these artifacts should be taken there. And then we also contribute toward the management. Each country contributes. And believe me, they will not have to contribute much because the revenue from global visitors alone would cover the cost of managing it, and we'll also have a surplus money that would be distributed among these countries, African countries. Why would anybody need to go to the museum in Paris or London or New York once all the artifacts are returned and located in one museum in Addis Ababa? So that's my final comment on this.
Okay. I would just like to touch on the two key themes in there, which is the colonial crimes and the reparations. Okay, so let's begin 1652, when the Africans turned up at the Cape of Good Hope, which is South Africa. We all know what transpired thereafter. 1914. Subsequently, we had apartheid that lasted up till 1994. A bit further in, we would come in contact with the people of Mashonaland, who bear all the brunt of Cecil Rhodes' British trading company, where multiple people were basically massacred and what have you. The result of which was Zimbabwe. Ian Smith declared a government of unilateral declaration of independence in 1967, and subsequently they fought a Bush war that ended in 1980. Now, why is that one important? That one is important that in the sense that the guy who is now the president of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, fought for their independence, and he's now being forced to pay compensation to those who seized the land from the Mashona people, which in itself is wild. Let's not forget what the British did with regards to the introduction of the idea of concentration camps. The concentration camps that the Germany industrialized in Europe was a British concept. They tried it first in South Africa and then subsequently in Kenya. We've not even remembered the idea of settler colonialism, because not only did they kill people, they also seized the land and replaced the people with Europeans. A reversal of sort happened in 1970 through the actions of Muammar Gaddafi when he expelled 20,000 Italians and subsequently seized all the properties and turned them over to the state. And I think that would have been one of the reasons why they chose to get rid of him. That's one. And then last but not the least, we cannot forget the people of Namibia, the Herero and the Nema, who were basically exterminated by the Germans. And now there is a reason why Namibia is an empty space. And the people are basically living destitute lives. The land that they used to own with the burial ground of their ancestors are now in the hands of the Germans, who until 2015 we're still waving Nazi flags in Namibia, in Africa. So again, we have to understand, or when the sister said some of us don't actually understand the history, it's because we don't understand it, which is why we constantly have to bring up these stories. And if you look at the reporting of this article, there is not one case of what transpired during the colonial period in there, except for the acknowledgement of the Algerian massacres. That's it. One would have think it was just an Algerian problem, not that it spread all over the continent. So, with that, we go to...
Okay, before we move on.
Yes.
I mean, okay, so waving the Nazi flag is a problem. But to me, the bigger problem is 5% of the European population of Namibia still own 80% of the land. That to me is the bigger crime. Go ahead and wave your Nazi flag if you want, so long as I have my land back. I would prefer that instead. So I just wanted to mention that. And then maybe one final point. Unless we find a way to force the issue, it's going to be difficult. We'll have conferences upon conferences. We need to perhaps at one point find a way to tie it into the resources that we have, the resources that they can only find in Africa, that they must buy for their production. If we say, in order for you to have access to these resources, you have to start paying into the reparations fund, then you qualify to even negotiate to buy these resources. Something like that. Something really that gives us leverage. Otherwise, it will be conference upon conference. Nobody disputes the justness of the cause. But now we have to find a way to force the issue.
Yeah, I would also like to add to the resources that the sister provided with regards to the books. You could read African Perspectives on European Colonialism by Adesoji, and one of the classic, it's The Scramble for Africa by Thomas Peckerman. It lists all the atrocities and everything that transpired in there. So that said, we go on to our next story, which comes from the Wall Street Journal. And it's titled, Sudan offers Russia its first naval base in Africa. What will give the Red Sea, the headline reads, Sudan offers Russia its first naval base in Africa. Red Sea port will give Moscow a vital edge in the strategic waters. And you will see why it is strategic in a second. So it says Sudan's military government have offered Russia what would be its first naval base in Africa and an unprecedented perch overlooking critical Red Sea trade routes, according to Sudanese officials. The deal, if it happens, will be a strategic advantage for Moscow. With a struggle to deepen its foothold on the continent, it will be a troubling development for the U.S., which has sought to keep Russia and China from controlling African ports where they could rearm and refit warships and potentially choke off vital sea lanes. So it's the idea, it's a proposal. Now, this is where Sudan is. And as you can see, it leads right up to the Suez Canal. And the United States, the Chinese base, and what have you, they're all here. So what do you say to this, Brother Milton?
All right. So to me, the bigger obvious issue in this story is the lack of sovereignty in Africa. Really, the lack of independence. Raila Odinga, may he rest with the ancestors, but his father, Ginga Odinga, wrote that classic book. I highly recommend. It's not as widely known as Rodney or Nkrumah, but it's called Not Yet Uhuru. And Uhuru, of course, is the Kiswahili word for independence. So when you read an article like this, it's clearly not yet Uhuru in Africa. You just read a sentence that this is a troubling development for the United States, not a troubling development for Africa. In other words, Africa is a backdrop to these stories. So if anybody still wanted to debate whether there's a single independent country in Africa, I would strongly recommend this article. These countries are not independent. 60 years after Uhuru, this article to me just captures it. And of course, what the Russians are trying to do, or what Sudan is trying to do, is to do something similar to what the U.S. just did with the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, under Tshisekedi, the government is facing serious duress from Rwanda, which a year ago was talking about marching all the way to the capital of Kinshasa using its proxy, M23, to overthrow the government. And they might have done that. And that's why Tshisekedi ran to the U.S. and he brokered this deal. Come have access to my resources. Well, let's negotiate. I don't know what the terms are going to be. And basically what he's saying is come and rescue me from Rwanda. Otherwise, they'll overthrow me. And on that basis, the U.S., which is interested in these earth minerals, agreed. And now, General Burhan in Sudan is trying to do the same thing. Russia, because Russia obviously is going to have military presence very close to the capital now, Khartoum. Come here, help my government because I'm under duress from the rapid, what's it called,
forces.
response, support forces, RSF, which is being armed and equipped by the United Arab Emirates. So he's trying to strike a deal similar to what the Democratic Republic of the Congo did with the United States. And of course, the question is, will this regime be there in 25 years? I very much doubt it. So the longevity of this agreement is quite suspect, but the logic behind it is very clear. They're duplicating what the U.S. just did with the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Well, sister?
Africa, my Africa, is this you? This back that is bent. My God. We are not at post-traumatic stress disorder because our trauma is ongoing.
Yes,
and I'm
it
telling you, after when I read, first of all, Adesoji, thank you for all the effort you put into calling through all these news.
Yes. I have to echo that as well. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. You keep us informed as well.
Yes, it's no small feat. But when I'm reading these articles in preparation for our conversations, I have to tell you, I am often just fighting back tears. We are not sovereign. We have no independence. We are pawns. So these people can basically fight their wars on our land and never touch their own countries.
Yep.
They're setting up war strips and so on and so forth. You're talking about the importance of these ports, right? And how it can affect global trade, because that area, about 12% of global trade passes through that area,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because this article is not written from our perspective at all. The other question is, how easily, like right now, Trump and his regime, or what would you call it? Cult, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They are looking for a foothold in Southern America to be able to launch their war against Venezuela.
Yes.
Africa, they don't even have to look. We have given them land and bases and everything. All our vulnerabilities, we hand over data to them. We beg them to come and train us, perhaps creating allegiances to them and not to us. I mean, if they wanted to attack a country in Africa, they don't even have to try to negotiate with anybody to any country for their land, because we've already given them access, unfettered access to us. Just boggles my mind. Having said that, yes, do I understand that this is an attempt to repel some forces against them? Yes, but what if as a continent we came together and we said, here are our weak areas and we are going to collectively shore it up? Listen, we keep talking about the unemployment of youth. You want to tell me that our young men and women will not willingly be trained and have an income that they can count on and defend their own land? That we could not, at the same time as we're defending our land, actually wipe out the majority of the issues we have with unemployment? My goodness. Okay. Having said all of that, Russia extends its naval reach and access to gold resources. It's always about our resources.
Yeah.
And what do we get in return, Africa? Certainly the Sudanese people are the overwhelmingly clear losers in this. They are displaced, they are killed, they are subjected to prolonged conflict. None of these resources come back to them. I don't think that they're even on their needs are not even on the table in terms of this negotiation. Then, comrade, you brought up the term of this agreement, 25 years. So I went to go and look. So the one in Djibouti, that's a 20-year lease that can be renewed. And that's with the US. China, sorry, that was, in Djibouti. US has Camp Lejeune in Djibouti. China also has one in Djibouti as well. Theirs is a 10-year term, renewable, and it's tied to broad infrastructure investment. Of course, with Sudan, I don't know what theirs is tied to. Maybe it's just, military assistance. And then, of course, France has a number of these kind of agreements too. But typically you see these agreements are like 5 to 25 years. So as you pointed out, why they went to the
25.
more extreme end of it and how these very old men are tying up the futures of the young people is mind-boggling to me. But this is where we find ourselves. My prayer is that in the short run, there is some stability to the area. But I'm hoping that as we make these deals with the devil for short-term stability, we hope that there's also a different part of government, which I doubt, which is thinking about how do we not become dependent on these people long term, and how do we really truly get to Uhuru, because we are not there.
All right. So just based on what you said, I wanted to add a few quick points. You spoke about the lack of sovereignty, how they extend their proxy wars. Just look at how diabolical this is. Ukraine was initially backing the military government, which is making the deal with Russia now.
Yes.
And now Ukraine is backing the rapid support forces. And Russia is the one that's backing the government now. The proxy war is being carried out, African blood, African soil. You mentioned the bases in Africa. I think the U.S. has about 80 bases.
Yes.
80 bases. In other words, more than even the number of African countries.
Yes.
So those are the 2 points I wanted to add.
How does that possibly make sense?
No, really, Nkrumah, rest his soul. I'm happy he's not here to see these things.
He would, yeah. He would be
in a mental hospital.
I know that it might be difficult to have a session where we look at this, but I think it might actually be helpful to understand the educational backgrounds of the leaders of African countries.
No, I agree, 100%.
That will really shine a light on why we're making these deals. I just wonder, when he went and sat down, you're talking about Congo and Rwanda, when they went to sign this deal, did you see the paperwork ahead of time? Did you read through it with a fine-tooth comb? Did you make sure you understood every term? And then who governs? Because anytime as a lawyer we make contracts, we include who governs this contract.
Right.
If there is an issue, where do we go to litigate it? I bet you it ain't Africa.
Right. Otherwise, it's a non-contract that does not benefit us. Right. I agree.
I mean, Kwame Nkrumah did say at the inaugural meeting of the Organization of African Unity, May 25, 1963, that we must remember that they have not yet gone away. So it is high time that we unite, and unite now, that is. And you can see the very thing he warned us against is now happening. They're back. They're literally here. They've never left.
They never left.
They never left, which is shocking. Anyway, we continue.
And one other point, in terms of the education, sister, you brought up the issue of education. Some of my students at John Jay used to come to me and say they've never heard of Thomas Sankara. That is just a crime.
Yeah.
That's a crime. These are people who are 18, 19 in
I
parliament.
learned about Thomas Sankara in secondary school in Nigeria. I didn't.
Think about that.
I did not learn about Amilcar Cabral. I did not learn about, I think there was a song we used to sing that had
Secretary.
I think maybe Biko, and of course we sang about Muratala Muhammad, but no, we didn't study our own history.
Yeah, that explains a lot of the problems we have today, really. And you're right, we need to have a session just focusing on that. What is being taught? What are people learning? Right. I detracted you from.
No. What
from
I'll try to do is get the syllabus for history in West Africa, because I think they're now taking the exam. So we'll probably be able to look through it and pull out some.
Very good. Let me see if
aspect of
I
it that
can
we
find
can-
something for East Africa as well. I'll let you know.
Yeah. And so, yes, we go to our next story, which the sister did say she likes deals, and it's about Niger. It might even give her a positive feeling. And it's about Niger, who has decided to float its uranium on the international market in break with France Orano. Niger's military regime has announced it is putting uranium produced by Somer, a subsidiary of French nuclear giant Orano, before the regime nationalized it in June on the international market. The story reads, uranium mining in Niger is at the center of a standoff between the junta that took power in 2023 and nuclear power Orano, which is 90% owned by the French government and has operated the mines in Niger for decades. The news was announced on state TV Tele Sahel in a report Sunday evening, citing comments by the head of the junta, General Abdurrahman Tiani. Tiani, the report said, has claimed Niger's legitimate right to dispose of its natural riches, to sell them to whoever wants to buy them under the rules of the market in complete independence. Russian energy Sergei Tislev said in July that Moscow wanted to mine uranium in Niger. I don't know why that was needed, but it gives an idea of what we're dealing with regards to the fact that not only is it a French publication, but they need to tell you who is benefiting when it's not themselves. Comrade.
All right. So since it has issues to do with contract as well, maybe sister can go first. And then I can focus on the political type aspects as well.
Okay.
So in the contract world, we like to say the devil is in the details. And a lot of times with these articles, the ones we've covered before this one, we don't get the details. We get these broad strokes that are given to us largely by the white media, the colonizers' media. I do want to just basic background information here, understanding that, of course, Niger was colonized by France during that scramble for Africa. That full military control was established by 1922. So when we're talking about time frames, and sometimes people want to say, oh, look at African nations, or what are they doing? You have to understand what kind of burden we've been carrying and for how long. And that even post-independence, which is really not independence, we really have not still had or have not seized the opportunities to truly control our destinies. So although Niger gained independence on August 3rd, 1960, clearly not much independence and not much stability, because there have been cycles of coup, military rule. Of course, fragile democracies. Why are they fragile? Because they're actually puppets, and they're puppeteers in the background impacting them. We should know that in terms of uranium, and uranium deposits that have been identified, Niger is in the top 10 of all countries in the world. And as the article pointed out, Western countries are getting about 25% of their uranium from Niger. So
Sure.
you understand how important it is. If you think of your income, if there is a source that gives you a quarter of your income that is suddenly threatened, that's going to be, I don't know about you, that's going to be a problem for me. There's going to be a lot of belt tightening. So just to bring that home, I do applaud Tiani's courage to step out in this way. It takes courage, and that's why so many other African leaders are not doing the same thing. It would make so much more sense if he wasn't stepping out as just Niger, and it was a collective. You can break this finger so much easier than it is to break this fist, right?
Yep,
And
yep,
so it would be great if there was a conglomeration, if you will. So we know that South Africa also has uranium, and we know that Namibia also has uranium. They're all in the top 10. What if even just those three countries came together, kind of like OPEC, and says we're operating as a block. And so without that happening, I think he's vulnerable. The country is vulnerable, but it is a step in the right direction. Understand that when we're talking about the ability to take control of who we sell our products to, that also means we get to dictate what that price is. That deal that Sudan is making with Russia is basically Russia. You also have access to our gold and pretty much on Russians' terms, right?
Yeah.
And so that limits or their right of first refusal. So that limits how much profit, quote unquote, you can make. And yet, let's look at what Niger is dealing with in terms of extreme poverty. 60% of the population lives on less than $3 a day. United States of America, I think they may still have the dollar menus at the fast food places. I don't go to fast food unless my kids have, dragged me there kicking and screaming. But I don't think you can get much for $3, okay? And that's for the day, right? Of course, Niger ranks near the bottom in terms of the global HDI, this index that they use to look at what's happening in countries. Climate vulnerability, they're dealing with the desertification, droughts, food insecurity, and 80% of the workforce is on subsistence farming. So clearly, this country needs these resources, and you can't start talking about really strengthening the country if they don't have the resources to even feed themselves. So I welcome what Tiani is doing. Obviously, we know there's going to be opposition. And the issue is a couple of things. Can the African countries as a whole come together? Which we're seeing Kenya will not, but that's a whole, we'll get to that. 2, will the greed of Western Europe nonetheless cause them to acquiesce and to work with Tiani? Because ultimately they want to get their grubby fingers on our resources. They need our uranium. And if this is the route they have to go, I think some of them will go that route until they can find a different way to break our backs. Comrade Albi, I definitely want to hear your take on this one.
Okay, well, you've covered a lot of the good territory. And so what we're seeing a reflection of what we discussed, I think, was it last week or the week before about Mali.
Mhm.
Mali, just, dug deep and say, we're going to get the gold on our terms. And that company that it was dealing with, even though they had, quote unquote, won arbitration, had to come back and deal on Mali's term. So I think Niger is definitely just copying that approach that as their template. They are, and of course, they are both in the alliance of Sahel states.
Yes.
So on a couple of other points. So Niger needs to, first of all, so we're discussing going forward, they need to also go back because Orano has been mining since before 1960, since before even independence. They need to do what Jerry Rawlings did with Kaiser Aluminum when Rawlings came to power, because Kaiser had twisted Nkrumah's arm. Kaiser said, we will buy electricity from the Volta Power Project on our own terms for the aluminum smelter. And Nkrumah really saw the long-term value of the project, the Volta River project, so he accepted it.
Mhm.
So basically, Kaiser was making, loads of profit all these decades. So Rawlings came and he said, we have to renegotiate this contract. And Kaiser refused. So Rawlings basically cut off the electricity, and Kaiser had no choice. And Kaiser said, wait a minute, the terms of the contract, you're violating it by cutting the electricity. And then Rawlings' team came back and said, no, the water level is very low. So it's not generating a lot, sufficient energy, even though they were just cutting it off. So Kaiser ended up agreeing to pay 3 times more than the previous contract had called for, 300%. And no private company would be willing to pay 300% more unless it is still making a profit.
True.
Otherwise, they would walk away, which means at the very least, that had been robbing Ghana by 300% since that project was built in 1965, right? So
Wow.
Niger needs to go back and have a forensic accounting of this contract going back to before the 1960s, and any money owed should be paid. And then they'll say, okay, now we can negotiate going forward. That's how they should deal with Orano. And then finally, think about it. Sister, you mentioned 25% of the uranium that is used by European uranium companies comes from Niger. And yet per capita income in Niger is $700. Criminal. And that needs to change immediately. And I hope that's what they're looking to do with this new bargaining position they're taking.
So I would like to highlight the historical part which the comrade has just touched on there, which is that Congo also comes into the equation with regards to uranium.
Yes.
Because Congo has the uranium, which people might unfortunately know was the chief component in the both bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the Americans, and also led to the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. Oh, but I want to focus on the dates. For those who are unaware, Africa actually had a 4-year window from the end of the transatlantic slave trade before Africa was carved up at the Berlin Conference. So just like in the United States where you had the Reconstruction, and I believe it was 12 years, Africa only had 4 years to move away from trading in human beings into palm oil, groundnuts, and stuff like that. While they were still recalibrating on what the future meant, the Europeans turned up again to say this becomes mine. We had Leopold, we had, so it goes to show that it is important that in writing all these articles, history also plays a key role in the journalists helping the readers to understand what they're really reading, not just in real contemporary times, because most of this stuff, as the good comrade mentioned, goes back. Because if you're operating a contract that has years of injustice written into it, you're perpetuating injustice going forward. So we come to...
So brother, I have a question, though.
Yeah.
Where are you even getting these 4 years from? Because slavery persisted in Ethiopia till the 1920s.
No, what I mean...
Legal slavery.
Yeah, what I mean...
And today, sister, and today, in Mauritania today...
is...
I don't think we ever had this 4-year... I don't think we ever had this reprieve.
Okay,
we didn't.
Let me qualify my statement. Yes, slavery still existed in Mauritania, in Ethiopia, in Madagascar to a lesser extent, and also, if I'm not mistaken, to be Libya up to a point, which has now come back again. Yes, but what I meant is, in the grand scheme of things, in the overall picture of Africa, it had that 4-year window to, recalibrate itself, as we all come to know.
The sister wants you to withdraw your comments. That's what she wants.
Okay. I withdraw the comments.
You know how long is that?
With a caveat.
No, we're good. Just so we're clear, like we have been under perpetual assault.
Yes. So
yes.
It just goes to show that. Okay. Yes. Yes. If you've been finding value in the conversation so far, we're trying to get to 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So do like, share, subscribe, and bring others to the fold, as it were. Yes. Okay. So we come to the final story, which is from Reuters, and it reads, Kenyan lawmakers identify disturbing threads of misconduct by British troops. And it is a parliamentary inquiry in Kenya has accused British troops of training there of a pattern of sexual misconduct and environmental harm that has led the forces from the former colonial power to be seen as an occupying presence. Oh my God. I can't believe somebody said that. The findings of the investigations by a parliamentary committee focused on defense and foreign relations highlights rising frustrations in the East African country at the conduct of the soldiers from the British Army Training Unit, Kenya, BATUK, who has faced a raft of highly publicized accusations in recent years. The most prominent allegation relates to 2012 murder of 21-year-old Agnes Wanjiru near the British Forces training camp in towns of Nayuki. The suspect, a British soldier named Robert Perkins, was arrested in Britain last month after years of campaigning by Wajiru's family and Kenya rights group, who said that killers were being shielded by a defense cooperation between the two countries. I believe we're familiar with the story, but all the same.
First of all, comrade, I want to thank you for keeping on top of this issue. I think this is a topic we've discussed probably at least 6 times now.
Yes.
And
yes.
I commend you for staying on top of it. You know, sometimes they have journalism awards. I think you deserve one for staying on top of this topic.
Thank you.
Consistently. No, really. You've kept us also informed, and of course the listeners you've kept, and viewers, you've kept them informed as well. So I want to thank you for that. So maybe I'll make a couple of very quick points, and then the sister can also come in. First of all, the headline is insanely benign and scandalous. You know, if you were not familiar with it, what Kenya lawmakers identified, disturbing trend of misconduct by British troops. What are you talking about? In the body of the article, we are told that rape, assault,
Murder?
abandonment of children, environmental degradation. This is what you call disturbing trend of misconduct. The headline is just insane. Okay, then the second thing, well, when they start talking about seeing as an occupying presence, to me, it means it's going to be difficult probably to renew this contract when it expires next year. So that's going to be a major test of the political class in Kenya. Are they going to abandon the people once again and go for the money? Probably, because that's how they've been operating. And then we learned that this guy, the soldier, Perkins, murdered this Kenyan young lady, Wanjiru, in 2012. And he's just being arrested now. Think about that. After 13 years. And this is because of campaigning by private civil organizations, human rights organizations, together with some members of parliament. And it still took 13 years. What if people had not even taken this initiative? It means he would never be prosecuted. But now that he's facing deportation to Kenya, I hope he spills the beans, because obviously he knows a lot. And his lawyer will probably try to get him some leniency in return to disclosing information. But I hope that information is disclosed publicly as well to Kenyans and to the media, so that it can actually lead to a wider prosecution, because obviously it's not just, Perkins that should be going down alone by himself. So these are the key points. And then finally, of course, imagine the inhumanity. They're sending out Kenyans without protective gear to go and explode explosives, ammunition. Think about that. It tells you the kind of so-called human beings that we are dealing with, So those are the points I wanted to make.
Wow. Sister?
Yeah, it's just misconduct. It's not a big deal that he took somebody's life. So here's the thing, and this predates colonialism. Leaders in whatever formation allowing these foreigners onto their soil and still allowing those foreigners to operate under their own laws and not our laws. Because if you killed my child in my house, how were you able to leave and go back to your house? And now I have to beg for an investigation and then hope that they actually do extradite you to come back to. So what are the terms of these agreements when you have these essentially occupying forces on your land? Brother Milton, you
We
want to
need
add
to
to
see
that?
those agreements. I agree. We need to see those actual agreements itself. Forget about the parliamentary report. We want to see a
Yeah.
copy of those agreements.
And I don't know that our people are thinking these things through. And yet, if we studied our history, these are lessons that we could have learned and implemented. If you're going to bring them in, what are the parameters? How do you protect yourself? How do you protect your people? Having said that, this whole discussion with the UK, you were saying you don't know if the Batuk will be renewed and allowed to continue. Well, the United States has slid in, right? They've just signed this debt for food storage, food security swap. Ruto is out there making all kinds of deals, being the lapdog and going to Haiti when you haven't taken care of situations. We also know that, of course, Kenya is dealing with 70% of their GDP is used to just service debt. So again, we know that they are in a tough place financially. But looking at all of this, I am glad that people like Adesoji, you are keeping this at the forefront. And all of you who are listening, share, like, make comments, because that helps to put pressure on the UK in terms of what they're doing. But it just seems like we keep just swapping out colonizers.
Yeah. More kudos to the brother. I mean, I first became aware of this problem on this very program that we're on right now.
And I think that if you're going to have any entity come to do work in your country, whether they're coming as soldiers, they're coming as traders, they're coming as missionaries, whatever they're coming as, there has to be a law on all of our books. If you sire children, you are financially responsible, and your company and whatever entity you came with is held.
That's actually a better proposal. The British military automatically liable.
So you come from China and you just impregnate women and want to leave. No. That child is going to have dual citizenship, and your country or whichever multinational corporation or whatever it is, you are paying for the well-being of that child. You are
that's a unique proposal that you should actually offer as an op-ed opinion, so it can be widely circulated. No, that's actually needed.
You know what?
Because once you take it away from individual obligation to the umbrella organization that brought them there in the first place, the behavior will change.
Yeah.
Because the company will start taking it from their salary automatically. The company will say, okay, I'm going to be paying, but it's coming from your salary, right? Or it's coming from your pension. You'll see results.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And thank you, both of you, for, again, shedding light, bringing your perspective with regards to these stories and many suggestions of books and what have you. We've come to the end of another episode of African News Review. Yes. The 1 hour runs fast. And yes, would love to continue, but time is money, as they would say. And looking ahead in the course of the week, we're going to have Women and Resistance, and that is 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the lady of interest this time is Marian Anderson. Again, Marian Anderson is going to be a person of interest on women and resistance. So again, I would like to thank you both. Comrade, last words?
Luta continua, as Samara Machel used to like saying.
And sister?
Thank you again for all your work and for the opportunity to be in conversation with our legend, our Jenga here, Comrade Milton Allimadi. It's such an honor. Thank you. And for all of you watching, listening, share. Let's get to 2,000.
Yeah, let's get to 2,000.
Let me add one other thing on Luta Continua. I forget the title of the book. It's about Fela. Fela, he was taking a plane in some European country, I think coming back to Africa. And he ran into some of the Frelimo folks,
from Mozambique.
And they're talking, Luta Continua, and, blah, blah, blah. And that fella asked them, what's Luta Continua? So the struggle continues. Oh, no, you guys are saying it wrong. Why should we be constantly fighting and fighting and fighting? So what you should be saying is the struggle must end. Only then I can come up with something like that.
Good point. Good point.
All right. On that point note, Asante Sana. Be well.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good night and God bless. That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.